Hello, now we're going to discuss lesson design and stages. So, when we think of a lesson, let's perhaps think of metaphors. So here's a metaphor. A good lesson is like a film because, and what I'd like you to think about is what makes a good film. And how would a good film also be a good example of how you could have a good lesson? So I want you to stop the video for now and have a think about it. What would make a good lesson and how would it be like a good film? Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So it would have a good start, it would have a middle, and I think you might be able to guess what I'm going to say next, an end. But perhaps more importantly, it's engaging from the start all the way till the end, and people want more of it. So that's what we need to think of when we think of a lesson. It's got to be something that's engaging, really interesting, and then at the end of it, the learners must want more. So before you start a lesson, we need to think of the purpose of why you're creating that lesson, and it's to achieve a learning outcome. We've already discussed this. Let's just read the example here. At the end of the lesson, the students should be able to understand and explain the causes of business failure. So that is going to be the learning outcome that we're going to use to present this example of how to create a lesson. So here we have a table and it's got 3 columns: stage, which is the numbers at the first stage, the second stage, the third stage, and so forth, the time for each stage, and then the procedure. What do you actually do during the lesson? And here we have 6 procedures and they're not in order. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to put them in order. I've already done the first one for you. Stage 1 is asks attendees if they know about any major business failures. So if you read through those, have a think about it and decide what should come next. If you'd like, you can stop the video, think about it before we go on to the next slide. Okay, so let's move forward. So in the first column, we've put the numbers against each procedure. So the first stage is ask attendees if they know about any major business failures. Second, explain the reasons for business failure. 3, put learners in a group. 4, hand each group a business case study to discuss. 5, one person from each group goes to the other group to talk about their particular case study. And finally, the class reports back to the instructor. So let's go to the next table. And in addition to making sure that the procedures are in logical order, you also need to think about the time. How much time are you going to spend on each procedure? How much time are you going to spend on each stage? So let's quickly read through the procedures and the amount of time we're saying or we're suggesting that should be taken. So stage 1 asks attendees if they know about any major business failures. That's 5 minutes. We call it the warm-up. You're trying to really just warm up the learners, the attendees, the students. You're trying to get an idea of what they know about the topic. And then the next 10 minutes, you explain the reasons for business failure. So this is where now you're explaining the concept. You're talking about the topic that is really the center of this particular lesson. So in this scenario, 10 minutes. Next, put learners into groups. That's 1 minute. And then after that, you hand each group a business case study to discuss. So now you've got the learners together and they're discussing this idea of what business failure is. So you've given them 15 minutes. And the next stage, you ask one person from each group to go to another group to talk about their particular case study. That's 4 minutes. And at the end, everyone reports back to the instructor or the teacher talking about what they learnt. Okay, so the times don't really have to be so rigid. Just for simplicity, I've just put a single number. But the time could be, let's say, 5 to 7 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes, 1 to 3 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, anything that helps you plan. But there's no harm in having a range. There's no need to be rigid. Okay, so let's move on. So what's important in lessons is interaction. Okay, so I want you to imagine a class and you're just sitting there and you're listening to the instructor or the teacher. And that's all that's happening. Now, how boring would that be? There wouldn't really be any interaction. How much are you going to learn? Some of the learners may just fall asleep. So interaction is something that's very important when you plan a lesson. So let's have a look through the example that we're going through. Stage 1, ask attendees if they know about any major business failures. So if you look at the interaction column, I've put T to SS. That basically means teachers to students. Okay? Then the next stage, explain the reasons for business failure. This is clearly the teacher speaking to the students, telling them about and giving them an idea, talking about the detail and explaining the concept that is the center of the lesson. Then the teacher puts the learners into groups. Again, the teacher is in control. And then the teacher hands every group a business case study to discuss. So now it's discussion phase, and this is where students are interacting with each other. And this is so important because actually this helps learners learn, it helps them interact with the content and the topic, and it's just one of the many ways in which you can get learners to properly understand the concept that you're trying to convey. Next stage, one person from each group goes to another group to talk about their case. And again, it's students to students. And then finally, the class reports back to their instructor. Again, students to teacher. So interaction is very important as part of your lesson planning. So let's move forward. And why did we have the lesson? Well, we needed to achieve a learning outcome. At the end of the lesson, the student should be able to understand and explain the causes of business failure. And, well, at the end of that lesson, that's what you did. You got the learners to explain what they had understood, and that's what we meant by students reporting back to the teacher. So, here's a task for you. Create a lesson based on the particular skill that you're interested in. How many stages or procedures will be in your lesson? What about the order? How long do you think you'll need for each stage? And of course you need to think about the interaction. But importantly, at the end of the day, you need to make sure that your lesson and its stages help to achieve the learning outcome. So all the best. Until the next time, goodbye.